everybody, it's Alyce-Kay Ruckelshaus from Threshold of Hineni, and I'm here for a craft table talk. I decided to change the name instead of craft table chat. I was thinking, I hope that this isn't like arrogant or even sacrilegious, but Martin Luther, the reformer, there were some books written of his conversations with his students in casual places, I think like bars and stuff, but pubs. I can't really remember. It's been like 35 years since I've read any of them, but they're called Table Talk. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to call this Craft Table Talk because we kind of talk about spiritual things and some not, and it's just very casual and anyway, so and very unplanned, very spontaneous. Anyway, so I wanted to apologize because I haven't done one of these for quite a while. I've been working on the tutorials for my Abraham journal, which we finally bound. So it's got all the pockets and stuff in it that we will probably have. We're going to start making the cards and everything. Oh, and I made this little bead dangle for it and everything. So that's been really fun, but I miss just crafting and I miss talking with you guys just about whatever. So anyway, so like this summer, I'm going to be pretty much focused as far as like my devotions and stuff on Abraham. So this is where I'm going to be writing most of the time. So I want to just have a small journal for myself that is pretty and that I can just put things that don't fit in with the Abraham stuff, like, you know, like really private stuff that I'm working through that I don't want to, because people will see my pages of the Abraham journal on YouTube and everything. So so I don't really want to, I want a special place where I can have kind of some private thoughts. So I thought I would work on that tonight a little bit while we talk. So that's what I'm doing. And I haven't even figured out yet like what size this is going to be or anything. So I'm just going to kind of figure it out as we go. These two are going to be the cover. Isn't this pretty? This is from the Delilah collection by Colorbach. And this is actually after I took out what I thought were the prettiest pages for a journal that I'm making as a graduation gift. And so these are like, you know, the ugly stuff that's left, and I think it's gorgeous. Anyway, this is my favorite color, kind of a teal blue. So we are going to, or I'm going to, first cut off all the little strips along the top, and then I'll figure out what I'm doing. But anyway, so I was kind of just going, as I was thinking that I was going to do this tonight, I was just going, okay, God, so what should we talk about tonight? And sometimes I haven't really even planned it out that much. It's just I sit down at the table and start talking and whatever comes out. But tonight I felt like he was saying to talk about something that some of you might have questions about. And before I even say what it is, I just want to say that I'm not going to talk about this in a controversial way. This is a topic that can be really controversial, and I don't want to get into that. I don't want to get into debate or anything. What I want to talk about, and this might take more than one of these conversations, is answering questions from the perspective of somebody who grew up not believing in this aspect of Christianity. It was like in our denomination, which was Mennonite Brethren, we did not believe in this at all. And but it's in the Bible, and so I always kind of question that. So moving from that to wanting this and the Lord not giving it to me, and then when I gave up, he unexpectedly gave it to me, and kind of the path of discovery after that. So having said that, I don't want to freak anybody out, because I know that there's a good chance that some of the people who are watching this, that this is something that they've been told isn't biblical. So it's up to you. You don't have to listen. I'm not going to try to convince you that you should do this. It's just like, I just want to answer questions. And so anyway, so this hot topic. Let me figure out where I want to cut this thing here. that would give me about 6 inches. I think I want it to be a little bit bigger than that. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about tonight, what I felt like God was telling me to talk about tonight, is speaking in tongues. And being from a denomination that didn't practice that and really adamantly didn't believe in it, to actually practicing it myself, I feel like I'm in kind of a unique position where I can sympathize with people who don't know anything about it or who are curious. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And that's what I want to kind of like share with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If you want to ask them in the comments, you can, or if you want to write to me privately, you can always do that through my website. There's a contact link at the bottom of every page, and hopefully I'll remember to put that in the, the description below. Sorry, it's been a really long day, and I'm really tired. And that's kind of why I need to do this. I'll hopefully put it in the description, but if I don't, it's thresholdofhineni.com. And like I said, there's usually on the bottom of every page is, my contact information. So, okay, so let me just kind of give you some of my background. So growing up, it never was actually even talked about in church that I heard. And so I didn't really even start wondering about tongues until I was in high school. And I was reading my Bible, and there's stuff about tongues in it. So I naturally kind of had questions. Gosh, I keep forgetting what my measurements were here. Okay, so this is 7.5. So we want 7 inches on the rest of these. Okay, so maybe I should write that down. So I had questions, but nobody would answer them because it was kind of like it was a taboo subject or something. 7 inches. Okay. It was kind of a taboo subject, and which is a little freaky. And off one, on side. So I was actually a very compliant child. I really just wanted to please everybody, but I also really wanted to know God. And there was so much about tongues in the Bible that I just really wanted to know about it. And I didn't have any way of pursuing that or trying to find out answers or anything. But at one point I went on a teen missions summer, and they are really awesome, you guys. They're based in Florida, and they take hundreds, probably thousands of kids every year on short-term missions in the summer. And the mission that I went on was to the foreign field of Seattle, Washington. I got to be on what we call dial-a-teen. It was a crisis hotline. It was really cool. And they gave us some really good training. And anyway, so it was really neat. And I made some great friends there, and probably learned more about studying the Bible from that experience than from any other experience. It was really cool. Now, do I want this to be vertical or horizontal? What do you guys think? I think I like vertical the best, even though horizontal would help for writing lines. But we're going to do it vertical. Okay, so anyway, so on that, I don't know if they were Pentecostal, but there were a lot of charismatics. Okay, and so what I mean by this, and this is probably one of my artificial definitions here, but what I have pretty much figured out from being in a lot of churches, the difference between charismatic and Pentecostal, if there really is a difference, is that I would say Pentecostals are like really emphasize the Holy Spirit. Okay, you know, kind of my theory about churches is that we all tend to emphasize one part of the Godhead. And it probably has a lot to do with our gifts. Like Methodists and Presbyterians and probably Catholics, although I don't know about Catholics as much, tend to emphasize the Father and God's awesomeness, his and reverence towards him and worship and stuff. And then evangelicals definitely emphasize Jesus more than they do the Father or the Holy Spirit. And then Pentecostals tend to emphasize the Holy Spirit. And Pentecostals tend to put a lot more stock, I guess you would say, in the spiritual gifts. I don't know if that's really true, because as an evangelical growing up, Mennonite brethren are evangelical. They're what's considered radical Protestants. We really did believe in the gifts of the Spirit, but we also we had an unusual Mennonite brethren church. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to pretend like I know things that I don't know. So anyway, so what was I saying? So the difference between Pentecostals and, okay, if you go to a Pentecostal church versus a charismatic church, the charismatics will tend to be like raising their hands, and the worship will be more casual, and they're, yeah, there might be speaking in tongues, but there might not be in the service. And then Pentecostals often, not always, but often believe that you have to speak in tongues if you're a Christian, that if you don't, then there's, you know, a question about your Christianity. Sometimes, not all of them think that. Like, I don't think that the Foursquare do, and they're definitely Pentecostals. So, you know, like I said, it's kind of an artificial distinction between charismatics and Pentecostals. And I can't remember why I said, oh, I know, because teen missions, what I went on, you guys understand as you're watching this that I'm not teaching, I'm just chatting, right? So, like, we're just, like, chatting as friends. I'm not trying to be an authority of anything here. I'm just, like, kind of casually answering your questions as friends, and I'm not, you know, I didn't prepare anything or anything like that, so there's just going to be a lot of ums and ahs as I figure out what to say. So anyway, so teen missions, I think, was at least charismatic for the most part. I'm not sure that that was like an official position, but I think that the leaders were. And I think that the team leaders of the team that I was on definitely were at least charismatic. And so it was my first real exposure to people lifting their hands when they were singing worship and stuff, which probably sounds really funny to some of you, because you probably are like, there's churches where they don't do that. Yes, there are churches where they don't do that. And in my church, you stood and very stiffly held a hymnal, even if you had all the hymns memorized. Maybe it was to keep your hands down, I'm not sure. So anyway, but I don't think I saw any like speaking in tongues in teen missions. It was just that exposure to people like lifting their hands and stuff. So it was kind of a nice introduction because it was very gentle and I didn't have anything super controversial that I had to worry about. Their emphasis also was on a direct relationship with Christ, which the Mennonite brethren definitely believe, but I haven't really been taught that. And I really got more instruction and example in teen missions of how to have a relationship with Christ. And I mean, really a personal, intimate relationship with him. And so that was just really, really special. But anyway, so I went home a little changed by that whole experience, as far as some of the stuff that I believed, and mainly the stuff that I had questions about. And so I started asking questions, but quickly learned that it wasn't okay to ask. And I think, it was just like, it was an uncomfortable subject to people in our church, the people that I asked, because they didn't know. They really probably didn't know the answers, and so it was just really uncomfortable. I think it's a lot more acceptable nowadays to not know something and to admit to it. But back then, authorities, pretty much had to come across like they knew everything, and at least to kids. And this is just my take on it, you guys, but that's how it seemed to me. And anyway, so I was pretty much just like told not to ask these questions, and in fact that just my wondering about it was wrong, was a sign that I was rebellious. And so I really tried not to wonder about it anymore, because that's the other thing, is I really tend to believe people who are in authority. And so if they tell me that I shouldn't do something, or I shouldn't think or say something, then I have this tendency to just believe them without questioning it. And I'm getting better about questioning it. And I know that there are some people who think that that's really bad to question. So anyway, please don't hate me. Anyway, so I didn't question it, and I just kind of went with it. So I didn't really have any more exposure to charismatics. A little bit when I was in college. Mostly I went to, the first church that I went to for a semester was a charismatic Episcopal church. It was really cool. And it kind of satisfied this longing that I had for both the liturgy, because growing up in an evangelical church, we didn't have the liturgy, we didn't have the formality, so there was kind of that formality there, but there was also the freedom and I don't even know how to explain it, of charismatics, of just the freedom, the lifting your hands in worship. It was just like this awesome combination of these things that I think my heart was just longing for. And I think too that when you're okay, now I think I wanted to cut off an inch, didn't I? I think too that when you're raised a particular way, some people gravitate towards the same thing that they were raised with, and other people gravitate more towards maybe novelty or something. And I don't think that it was so much novelty that I was after as meaning. And what I had lived with my whole life didn't have as much meaning to me, because it was what I had lived with all my life. And so the ritual, the liturgy was just beautiful. The Book of Common Prayer, I loved it. And then here it was combined with this charismaticness. And again, I didn't hear any speaking in tongues there, and I don't know if they believed in that or not. I went there for a semester, and then I started dating a guy, and we went to a Christian Missionary Alliance church, which is what my parents had grown up in. And so again, an evangelical church, as far as I know, they didn't believe in or practice speaking in tongues. I never saw or heard any of that. And then I went there for most of the rest of the time. I went for a semester up to Oregon and went to George Fox College, which is Quaker. And so there, again, kind of an interesting combination. I went to some Quaker churches, or not churches, they don't call them churches, they call them meetings. I went to some Quaker meetings, which interestingly enough, my husband now is Quaker. But I also met a girl who became a very good friend of mine and was in my wedding, who she and her boyfriend went to Foursquare, which is Pentecostal. Okay, just a second. Oh, sorry, I bumped the camera. I'm so sorry. I just need to grab my lace, which is just over here. Sorry. So I went with them to church sometimes. And part of the reason for this was because I was only going to be there for a semester, and so I kind of wanted to try out some things that were new. And does this look like a weird size? And I was going to put something on the cover before I sewed it. Oh well. I'm not thinking. It's going to be kind of plain because it's just going to be for me, and it's just going to be for the 7, and I'm just going to write in it. Anyway, so I went to these Foursquare churches. Okay, so it was really interesting because the first Sunday that I went with her to her church in Newburgh, which is where George Fox is, they sang in tongues. I never heard of such a thing, and it was amazing and beautiful. And it's hard to describe. Everybody was singing different words in different languages, but it all harmonized beautifully. It was just really incredible. And I loved it, and I wanted to hear it again. It was like this, it wasn't just like a curious, like, oh, that's beautiful Bach music. It was like this thing in my spirit that was just drawn to it, and from that point on, I just craved it. And it was years before I heard singing in tongues again, and I didn't even know at that point what it was. So, okay, so I also went with them to a very large Foursquare church that was really more like a Baptist church as far as I could tell. There was nothing really charismatic about it. They sang hymns, and it just seemed like kind of like what I was used to, so I was very comfortable with it and everything, and I liked it. And so that was kind of like my little introduction sort of to tongues, was that church in Newburgh, very, very small Foursquare church. And then, I went back to Westmont, and I think in our Vesper services on Sunday evenings, they were more casual, and so like people would raise their hands in worship and stuff, but again, there was no tongues or anything like that. And then I went to Europe for a semester and went all kinds of other places, so nothing charismatic or Pentecostal there. And then I had an internship at a Free Methodist church, and no exposure to tongues or charismatics or anything there. Okay, so that was kind of the end of that for a long, long time. And then, it's like I got married out of college, and we went to the church that I grew up in, the Mennonite Brethren Church, and then eventually when we moved to Los Banos, we went to a Baptist church. So, again, just like no exposure to any of that. But there was just this kind of, first of all, there was this longing to me to hear again that singing in tongues. It was like listening to people in heaven singing or something. It was just so beautiful. And there was also just every time that I read, especially in 1 Corinthians, about what Paul said about tongues, it just made me wonder. And I had questions more than anything else. It wasn't even so much that I wanted to speak in tongues. It was just that I had these burning questions. Well, my family was going to a Baptist church in Los Banos, and I heard from a friend that a Foursquare church was starting up, and it was starting in the pastor's home. And so, remembering my experiences with the Foursquare in Oregon, I decided I wanted to go. And it was, at a point in my life, I had 3 little children and kind of needed some alone time. And so I went by myself. And I was also just going through some really difficult things emotionally and everything. And so I also kind of just wanted to be invisible. And there were about 50 people there, but it was kind of cool. I was pretty much invisible. And I would leave like right after the service so that I didn't have to talk to anybody or get to know anybody or anything. But then the church got to be big enough to be in. They bought a building or rented it, and it was an old dog grooming parlor, and so we moved there. And the first Sunday there, I sat in the very back row. It was super crowded. We went to 2 services like almost right away, and I sat in the very back row, and the pastor and the worship leader were going around introducing themselves to everybody and greeting everybody. And, it was just a really exciting thing because they had gotten big enough to be in a building. And so, they asked me what my name was, and I told them, and I didn't say anything else. And I pretty much stayed invisible. And I don't think it was that first Sunday, but it was, I think it was that first Sunday that we were there. Anyway, it was so weird. So the pastor started coughing a lot, and he looked around and he called me up there. And it was like, he didn't know me from Adam, and I wanted to be invisible. But I went up, and he asked me to read his sermon out loud. And then, he'd stop me every once in a while to make some comments. And so that was kind of fun. And I think that the reason that God put me in that position of doing that was because in this sermon, he was talking about baptism. But he didn't just call it baptism. He called it water baptism, which I had never heard of. It's like, what else are you going to get baptized in? Kool-Aid? And so, I was just like, what? Why are they calling it water baptism? Anyway, I found out because I was reading the sermon, and I would have heard it too, and I was paying attention to the sermons and everything, but it was like God was like saying, hey, pay attention here. So I heard about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And I was like, immediately kind of like this, I need to know more. And again, it wasn't really so much that I wanted that, it was that I was curious, but not just like curious, but like, I think it was a spirit-led curiosity. I don't know how else to explain it, because it was just like this craving, this passionate craving to know. And so I stayed and I talked to the pastor afterwards, and he gave me a book by, I think it's by A.W. Tozer, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, I'll link it in the description below. It's a really small book and written by one of D.L. Moody, Dwight Moody's sidekicks, I guess you'd call him. One of the guys who worked with him. Dwight Moody was in the 19th century. He led a lot of revivals, and he started the whole Sunday school movement. And really important person as far as the Christian faith goes. Okay, what happened to the piece that was supposed to go in between here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, this is weird. What did I do with the other piece, you guys? I lost it. It's here somewhere. Oh, here it is. So it was somebody, it's like I had heard his name before, because my major was theology, was religious studies with an emphasis in theology and Greek. And so, I knew who he was. Tozer, I think it was. Now I don't know who he is. And so it was somebody whose writing I trusted. And it was just a short book, and he was just talking about not speaking in tongues, but he was talking about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And we are now at 29 minutes, and so I am going to stop this, and I'll start again and post the second part tomorrow. Okay? I love you all. Bye-bye.